The social worker's pen stopped moving the moment my father walked through the front door. He'd been gone for 53 days. He came back with a deep tan, a new leather jacket, and a smile that disappeared the second he saw her sitting at our kitchen table with a manila folder open in front of her. Behind him, my stepmother hovered in the doorway, clutching her purse like she was deciding whether to run. Neither of them had expected this. Neither of them had expected any of it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning. Back to a Tuesday morning in late June when everything I thought I understood about family got rearranged into something I barely recognized. My name is Ren Calloway. I was 26 years old, recently laid off from a marketing job I'd held for 3 years, and living back in my childhood home in Dayton, Ohio, while I figured out my next move. Not exactly where I pictured myself at 26, but life doesn't ask for your input on timing. My little brother Oscar was 12. He lived with our dad full time because our mum passed when Oscar was 4, and I'd been in Columbus for most of his childhood, only coming back on weekends and holidays. When I moved back in February, I finally started understanding who Oscar actually was. Quiet, funny in this dry, deadpan way that caught you off guard, obsessed with building things, Lego sets, birdhouses, model planes. He had 17 unfinished projects lined up on his windowsill, and he could tell you exactly what stage each one was in. I loved that kid more than I knew how to say out loud. Our dad, for his part, had been dating his girlfriend. I'll call her Patrice because that's her name, and I have no interest in softening her edges, for about 2 years. She had her own condo in Centerville, a grown daughter who lived out of state, and a personality that I can only describe as decorative. Nice to look at, not much use in a storm. Dad was 62, semi-retired from his HVAC business, and had spent the last decade building a life that was peaceful and uncomplicated. He wanted easy. Patrice was easy. I understood that even when it frustrated me. What I didn't understand, and what I don't think I'll ever fully understand, was the morning of June 23rd. I heard him before I saw him. Suitcase wheels across the hallway floor. Not the small weekender bag he used for fishing trips. The big navy blue one that only came out for airports. I found him in the kitchen at 6:40 in the morning, dressed like he was going somewhere nice, coffee already made, and mostly drunk. Oscar was at the table eating cereal, still in pajamas, hair sticking up in 4 different directions. He looked up when I walked in, and then looked back down, which told me he already knew something was happening and had decided not to ask about it. Dad explained without quite meeting my eyes. Patrice had a timeshare in Hilton Head, a full month. Her daughter was coming up from Atlanta to join them for part of it. It was their anniversary. He'd been planning it for a while. He was sorry he hadn't mentioned it sooner. There was money on the counter, he gestured toward it, and he'd be back by the end of July. I looked at the counter, $200, cash. Oscar didn't say anything. He just ate his cereal and stared at the bowl. I tried to argue. I pointed out that I was unemployed, that my savings were running out, that $200 for 2 people and a full month was not a plan, it was a suggestion. I said Oscar had a dentist appointment the following week and summer reading program starting July 5th, and that the electric bill was sitting on the counter unopened and someone needed to deal with it. Dad told me I was being dramatic. He said I was 26 years old and capable of handling things for a few weeks. He said this trip was important to him and he needed me to be supportive right now, not difficult. Supportive. He used that word. Patrice beeped from the driveway. Dad grabbed his bag, squeezed Oscar's shoulder without looking at him, told me he'd check in when he got there, and walked out. The door shut. Oscar and I sat in the kitchen listening to the car back out and disappear down the street. After a long moment, Oscar picked up his spoon, tapped it against the rim of his bowl twice, and said, "Well, that happened." I laughed, which surprised both of us. Then I pulled the $200 off the counter and counted it like counting it again would change the number. It didn't. Our mortgage payment, Dad's mortgage technically, but we were all living here, was $1,340 and due on the 1st. It was June 23rd. The electric bill I've been afraid to open turned out to be $218. Our refrigerator had eggs, a block of cheese that was almost done, some condiments, a half-empty bag of frozen peas, and a lot of shelf space. I called Dad that evening. Voicemail. I left a message that I tried to keep calm, explaining the mortgage situation, asking him to call me back. He didn't. I called again the next morning. Voicemail again. By day 4, I'd called 6 times. On the 7th call, it went straight to voicemail without ringing, which meant one of two things. Either his phone was off or I'd been sent to voicemail manually. I told myself it was the phone. I kept telling myself that for another 3 days. We had $200, no income, and a 12-year-old who had started eating smaller portions at meals without saying why. I noticed because I was doing the same thing. You can either let fear hollow you out from the inside or you can use it like a fuel. I'd read that somewhere once and thought it sounded like a poster in a dentist's office. Standing in our kitchen at 10:30 on a Wednesday night with the lights off to keep the bill down, I finally understood what it meant. I was going to figure this out. I was going to keep the lights on and food in that refrigerator and a roof over my brother's head. And when our father came back from his anniversary trip, he was going to see exactly what he'd left behind. He just had no idea what that was going to look like. If you're watching this and you're new here, please subscribe and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. I read every single one, and it means more than I can say. Now, let me tell you what happened next. Finding work in late June sounds easier than it is. I'd been sending out applications since February with limited results and the kinds of jobs that hire immediately, restaurants, retail, delivery, weren't exactly lining up to accommodate my schedule, which included being home when Oscar got back from his summer program each afternoon. I did what I could. I signed up for a gig delivery app and started doing grocery and food delivery in the mornings before Oscar woke up and in the evenings after he went to bed. The pay was inconsistent. Some days $20, some days $60, and the gas ate into it badly. My car was a 2014 Honda Civic with 140,000 miles on it and a tendency to run hot in traffic. Every time I sat at a light watching the temperature gauge, I had a quiet negotiation with whatever mechanical mercy the universe had left for me. By day 8, I'd made $119 in deliveries and spent $47 on gas and $83 on groceries. Oscar ate a lot of pasta that week. He didn't complain. Not once, but I found him in the kitchen one afternoon, making a list of what we had left in the pantry, organized by how many meals each item could stretch into. The kid was 12. He should have been outside with friends or destroying something in a healthy, age-appropriate way. Instead, he was doing inventory. That broke something in me that I haven't fully repaired since. Day 10 brought a letter from the mortgage servicer. Not a bill, a notice. A payment due notice with a late fee schedule attached. I read it 3 times. Taped it to the refrigerator where I couldn't ignore it. Then I tried to call Dad again. That time I got a response. Not a call. A text from an unfamiliar number with a South Carolina area code. He'd gotten a new phone apparently. The text said, "Ren, please stop calling. We are trying to relax. Everything is fine. Figure it out. Figure it out." I stared at that text for a long time. Then I put my phone face down on the counter and went to check on Oscar. He was in his room, working on one of his model planes. Not the unfinished ones on the windowsill, a new one. He'd used some of his own birthday money, saved from last spring, to buy it at the hobby shop on Salem Avenue. He looked up when I came in, read my face the way 12-year-olds who've been paying attention learn to read adult faces, and went back to his plane without asking. I sat on the edge of his bed and watched him work for a while. He had the instruction sheet spread out and weighed down at the corners with spare parts, methodical, patient. He was putting together something complicated from 100 small pieces, and he was doing it one step at a time. I thought I could learn something from that. The idea came from our neighbor across the street. Her name is Gwen, mid 50s, retired teacher. Flower beds that she treats like a second career. She'd noticed I'd been home a lot and knocked one morning to ask if I was okay. I told her a shortened version of the truth. She listened the way good people listen, without interrupting or offering opinions about my father that I hadn't asked for. Then she mentioned, almost offhandedly, that the community center on Wayne Avenue had been trying to set up a summer tutoring program for middle schoolers and couldn't find anyone to coordinate it. They've got funding, she said, but no organizer. I could introduce you to the director if you want. I wanted. The community center director was a woman named Evelyn Cross, early 60s, former school principal, the kind of person who makes decisions quickly and then sticks to them. I walked in with a printed resume and my marketing background and made the case that coordinating a tutoring program was fundamentally the same as running a campaign. You have a target audience, a message to deliver, a team to manage, and a deadline. She looked at my resume for about 45 seconds. Then she offered me a part-time coordinator position. $17 an hour, 20 hours a week, starting immediately. It wasn't a solution, but it was a beginning. Oscar started coming with me some afternoons, officially as a student helper that Evelyn invented on the spot when she met him. He helped younger kids with their reading assignments, checked out books for them from the small library in the back room, and organized the supply closet with a level of precision that made Evelyn describe him as alarmingly competent. He started to seem like himself again. By week 3, the tutoring program had more kids enrolled than we'd expected, almost 40 students, twice the initial projection. We were using 2 rooms at the center and had 3 volunteer tutors I'd recruited from a Facebook group for retired educators in the Dayton area. Word was getting out. Parents were dropping kids off early and picking them up late because they trusted what was happening here. One afternoon, a woman came in and asked if there was any help for parents who couldn't read well enough to help their kids with homework. Not for her kids, for herself. She said it quietly with her eyes on the floor, like she was confessing something shameful. I thought about that for 3 days. Then I went back to Evelyn and proposed an adult literacy component. Evening sessions, twice a week, designed around working parents' schedules. Evelyn said she'd been trying to find someone to launch exactly that program for 2 years. We launched it on a Thursday with 6 participants. By the following Thursday, we had 14. I want to stop here and tell you something, because I think it matters. None of this felt like inspiration. None of it felt like I was building something meaningful or following some deeper purpose. It felt like desperation wearing a blazer. It felt like doing the next thing because not doing it wasn't an option. I was 26 years old, almost out of money, running delivery routes at 6 a.m. before my brother woke up and holding tutoring sessions for adults who were braver than I could have imagined because they were willing to sit in a folding chair in a community center and admit they needed help. I was not the hero of the story. I was just someone who hadn't stopped moving yet. Then came day 31, a text from my father's original number. He'd apparently gotten his old phone back or switched again. The message was, Patrice and I are extending the trip. Another 3 weeks. Money from savings account if you need more. PIN is 2847. I stood in the kitchen and read it 4 times. Another 3 weeks. No apology. No question about Oscar. Just a PIN number, like the cash equivalent of a parent. I didn't use the savings account. I don't know why exactly. Maybe pride. Maybe because something in me understood that the moment I did, I was agreeing to the terms of the arrangement, that it was okay, that money was the same as presents, that a PIN number could substitute for a father showing up. Oscar noticed that I'd seen a text. He didn't ask what it said. He went back to his model plane, which he'd finished by then, and moved on to the next one. That night, I lay awake for 2 hours thinking about the adult literacy participants who showed up twice a week to a folding chair in a community center because they wanted a better life for themselves and their children. I thought about how much courage that took. And I thought about how my father was sending me a bank pin from Hilton Head while his 12-year-old son was eating store brand pasta and teaching himself to be invisible so he wouldn't be a burden. I made a decision. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it properly. The next morning, I called the Dayton Foundation, which I'd researched at 2 a.m. on the community center's Wi Fi. They offered small grants for emerging nonprofit programming. The application was 15 pages. I spent a week on it, working at the kitchen table after Oscar went to bed, using the tutoring program data I'd been collecting. Enrollment numbers, literacy assessment results, attendance rates as evidence of impact. Gwen proofread it. Evelyn signed off on the organizational pieces. 6 weeks later, we got a $12,000 grant. I didn't cry when I found out. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a Kroger for about 10 minutes, not doing anything. Then I drove home and told Oscar. He said, $12,000. I said, yeah. He thought about it. We should probably pay the mortgage. We did. By day 47, the tutoring program had a waiting list. The adult literacy sessions had moved to 3 nights a week. 3 local businesses had donated supplies. A reporter from the Dayton Daily News had called after seeing a Facebook post that one of the parents shared, and she wanted to do a feature story. I said yes before she finished the sentence. The article ran on a Sunday. The headline was something like, Dayton woman builds learning hub while caring for younger brother alone. I hadn't framed it that way in the interview, but the reporter had done her research, and when she asked about my home situation, I told the truth, the same way I'd been telling it all summer. My father had left for a month-long vacation and extended it to nearly 2. I was 26. My brother was 12. We had $200 when it started. The story spread in the way that local stories sometimes do when they hit the right nerve. Shared in Facebook groups. Picked up by a news aggregator. Then picked up by a Columbus TV station that did a short segment for their evening broadcast. By Tuesday, I had 47 messages in my inbox from strangers. Some were donations. Some were offers to volunteer. Some were from people who said they'd been in similar situations and just needed to hear that someone else had survived one. One of those messages was not from a stranger. It was from Patrice. Her message was 3 sentences. She said she'd seen the article. She said she wanted me to know that leaving Oscar without more support was never her idea. She said she was sorry. I read it, set my phone down, picked it up again, read it again. Then I put it in a folder I created called Things I'm Not Ready to Deal With and moved on with my day. My father's message came 2 hours later from his original number. It was longer. He said he'd seen the article. He said he was proud of me. He said he was coming home. He didn't say he was sorry. Not in that message. They flew back on a Thursday. I knew what time the flight landed. I did not go to the airport. What I didn't know, what neither of us knew, was that the article had been seen by someone else besides family. Gwen, my neighbor, who had been watching the summer unfold from across the street and had done something I didn't find out about until later. She had called the county's child welfare line in early July, about 2 weeks after Dad left. She'd reported that a minor was living without an adequate guardian, that I was an adult but not the legal parent, and that the situation warranted documentation at minimum. She hadn't done it to cause trouble. She'd done it because she was a retired teacher who understood what kids falling through the cracks looked like and refused to let it happen on her block. Child welfare had opened a file. They'd reached out to me in mid-July, and I'd met with a caseworker named Miss Trolley, and I'd met with a caseworker named Ms. Delgado, who was professional and kind, and explained that she needed to understand the situation before determining next steps. I told her everything. She'd documented everything. And she'd documented everything. And she'd noted that my father would need to be contacted when he returned. When he walked through the front door Thursday afternoon, Miss Delgado was already at our kitchen table. He stopped in the doorway. His tan was deep and even. His new leather jacket was exactly the kind of thing you buy on vacation when you're feeling good about yourself. He saw Miss Delgado. He saw the folder on the table. He looked at me. I didn't say anything. Patrice, behind him, made a small sound and stayed near the door. Miss One. Delgado introduced herself calmly and explained that the county had opened a welfare check on Oscar following a community report in early July that she'd been working with me throughout the summer, and that she needed to speak with him about the circumstances of his absence and his plans going forward. I watched my father's face move through several expressions that I don't think he knew were visible. Surprise, then the beginning of denial, then something that cracked underneath when Oscar appeared at the top of the stairs, looked down at the scene in the entryway, and said in his usual dry tone, "Hey Dad, you missed the tutoring program's first grant. We got $12,000. My father looked at Oscar for a long moment, then he sat down at the kitchen table. The conversation that followed lasted almost 2 hours. I won't recreate all of it. What I'll say is that Ms. Sense Delgado was thorough, fair, and did not let vague answers pass without follow-up. My father had no good explanations for why he hadn't checked in more consistently, why he'd sent a bank pin instead of calling, why he hadn't made concrete arrangements for Oscar beyond leaving cash. He said he'd trusted me. He said he thought things were fine. He said a lot of things that were honest in the way that self-serving explanations are honest, technically accurate, completely insufficient. In the end, because Oscar hadn't been physically harmed, because I was an adult who had managed the situation capably, and because my father had no prior record of neglect, there were no criminal charges. But there was a formal finding and a requirement: 6 months of family counseling, a parenting accountability plan co-developed with the county, and 30 hours of community service for my father. When the cars worker asked where he might complete his community service, I was quiet for a moment. Evelyn had been asking me for weeks if I knew anyone who could help with facility maintenance at the center. Small repairs, painting, moving equipment. My father had run HVAC company. He was good with his hands. He understood how buildings worked. I looked at Oscar before I answered. Oscar gave me a look that said he knew exactly what I was considering and had no objection. I told Miss Delgado about the community center. I said my father had skills that could be useful there. She said the decision was his, but if the organization would have him, it could count toward his hours. He started the following Monday. The first few weeks were uncomfortable for everyone. Dad showed up in clothes too nice for maintenance work, because that's the kind of thing you don't know until you know it. Evelyn gave him a list of tasks and let him find his way. He was quiet around the staff and volunteers, which was unusual for him. He's always been socially easy, a natural talker. But I think he understood that no one there was particularly interested in him being charming. He fixed a broken radiator in the main room, rehung 3 doors that didn't close properly, repainted the supply closet that Oscar had organized, which made Oscar briefly and vocally upset until the new paint dried and he reorganized it and declared it an improvement. Week 4, one of the adult literacy participants came in early and sat in the empty room, waiting for the evening session to start. My father was repairing a window latch in that room. They ended up talking for almost an hour. The man, I'll just say he was in his late 40s and had been working construction for 20 years and was learning to read at 60 words per minute and thought that was embarrassing until I told him that 60 words per minute was better than 0, which is where everyone starts. Told my dad about why he was there, about his kids, about wanting to read his daughter's school projects without pretending. My father came to find me afterward. He didn't say much. He said, "The guy in there, he's something else." I said, "Yeah, he is." My dad nodded, looked at the floor, looked back up. He said, "I owe you more than an apology." I didn't tell him it was okay, because it wasn't, not fully, not yet. But I told him the door was open. That was the most honest thing I could give him. That was 7 months ago. Today, the Wayne Avenue Learning Hub, that's what we named it. After a long debate where Oscar lobbied hard for a name involving the word academy and was eventually outvoted, is a registered 51c3 non-profit. We have funding from the Dayton Foundation, three smaller grants, and a growing base of individual donors who found us through the news story. Enrollment in the tutoring program averages 52 students per session. The adult literacy program has served 31 participants since July. Two of them have since passed their GED exams. I got a card from one of them. It's on my desk. I started a full-time director role in October. It doesn't pay what the marketing job paid, but it pays enough, and every day I actually understand why I'm going to work. Oscar is 13 now. He finished his 17th model and started his 18th. He wrote a story for his language arts class about the summer and read it aloud in class, which his teacher described to me as gutting in the best possible way. He got an A. He said it was his easiest A because he didn't have to make any of it up. My father completed his 30 hours at the center in November. He still comes in twice a month, not for hours, just because he shows up now. He and Oscar has started going to the hobby shop on Salem Avenue together on Saturday mornings. They don't always buy anything. Sometimes they just walk around and look at things and talk. I don't know exactly what they talk about. I don't ask. Some repairs happen quietly. Patrice and I are not close. We may never be close. But she sent a donation to the Learning Hub in December, anonymously. Except she used her personal email to do it, so it wasn't all that anonymous. I emailed her a receipt and a thank you note. She replied with one line, "He's a better person than his worst decision. I hope you know that. I'm still deciding how I feel about that. Some things take longer." I still have the text my father sent from Hilton Head, the one with the PIN number. I kept it not out of bitterness, though I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some of that at first. I keep it because it reminds me of the exact moment I understood what I was capable of. Not because someone told me, not because circumstances were good, because circumstances were as bad as they'd ever been, and I chose to do the next thing anyway. $200 and a 12-year-old doing pantry inventory. That was the beginning. I don't know what the end looks like yet, but I know what we built from almost nothing. In the summer when we were supposed to fall apart, we didn't fall apart. And when my father walked back through that door and finally saw what we'd built without him, the look on his face wasn't something I'd been waiting for. I'd stopped waiting for it sometime around week 4, when I realized I wasn't doing any of it for him to see. That look, when it came, wasn't a prize. It was just information, proofs that reality has a way of catching up with everyone eventually, no matter how nice the weather is in South Carolina. Some things you have to build yourself. Some lessons cost more than they should. And sometimes the people who leave you behind end up spending the rest of their lives walking back to something you built while they were gone.